It is right now a great honor to welcome and to introduce the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO of the American Jewish Committee, who's a very busy man, as you can imagine, but decided to take of his time to be here with us. Pleasure to introduce Mr. Ted Deutch.
Thanks. Thank you. Nice to see you. Hi, everyone.
Thank you, really, for spending the time, for kind of making time to be able to be here together with us. And as I said, I've said it many times this morning, and I just want to say it to you, because really an expression of hakarat tov, gratitude to you. Your team is amazing, and I think that in walking around today and listening this morning to the range of sessions and the richness of the content, and being able to see like high school kids really invested in the future of the Jewish people because they're listening to things that really grab them. So I just want to thank you for the investment of the American Jewish Committee in making this happen.
Well, I appreciate that. And this is a tremendous opportunity for us to engage. This is a place that we've wanted to do something like this because of the quality of the students, the commitment of the students, and the leadership that we see in front of us. So I'm thrilled that this morning went great, and I'm really excited to share some thoughts here too.
Great. We have so many years we want to cover, because I think that part of what this is all about in a large sense is young Jewish men and women being able to imagine themselves, envision themselves as really making change and having impact in the world. And that's been your whole life, your whole career. And I wanted to start taking kind of going a little ways back. You're a congressman. I think it's important for everybody to recognize Mr. Deutch is a congressman representing the state of Florida from 2010 to 2022. That is a serious number of years, and interested in how your Jewish background actually shaped your career choices and how you ended up doing public service.
Sure. Before I do that, it would be, since you mentioned I was a member of Congress from South Florida, I would love to see, if this is okay by a show of hands, if anyone here has connections, family in anywhere from, say, Boca Raton to Hollywood to Miami Beach. Okay.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Thanks.
That was about 80%, I think.
This is the first time since I left Congress. I'm sorry I'm no longer there. There's so many voters. Anyway. So I grew up in an environment very different than SAR. I grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. In my high school of over 2,000 students, there were 3 Jewish kids, 3. And so for me, I was, from the earliest moments, I was the authority on all things Jewish. I was the rabbi. I was the pro-Israel community. I was the person that they reached out to whenever there was a question around a holiday. And there was a lot of responsibility that I felt with that. And that's something that I've taken with me throughout my whole career. And I was proud to be the person that my friends in high school, teachers in high school turned to, and then ultimately that was the case all through the state Senate, Congress, and now I'm privileged to run a Jewish organization. Did
you experience challenges as a student in that respect? I mean, we're focused on anti-Semitism. What was your experience as a student?
I did. I had, look, most of there was some anti-Semitism where I grew up. There were neighborhoods that still, even when I was growing up, had deed restrictions saying that the people living in the homes couldn't sell their homes to Jewish families. And I knew where those neighborhoods were, and I knew my friends who lived in those neighborhoods, and that these were sometimes conversations that they had at home. That spilled over sometimes into school. There are a couple of examples of kids who brought some of that anti-Semitism with them and made comments, the kind of comments back then, 40 years ago, that are sadly some of the same kinds of things that we hear today. In fact, some of the same comments that we hear from members of Congress about Jews and money and Jews being disloyal to the United States. There were a couple of instances growing up where I dealt with that and had some real challenges.
And yet you maintained your strong Jewish identity through that. And even when you're in public service, obviously that was an important part of your life. So I'm interested first in making a decision to be in public service. There's so many career choices one could make. And how did your Jewish values, how did that shape that decision?
Sure. Well, first of all, if there is one through line, Rabbi, in everything that I'm going to say here today, how did I maintain that? I mean, it is, and you know this, and all of you are completely possessed with this, but it is absolutely about Jewish pride, and it started in my home, and the Jewish experiences that I didn't get at school, I got in my home, and I got it at my summer camp, and it was always being proud of who I was as a Jew. That mattered then, that mattered just as much now, and that will matter in all of the ways that you are and will become, to a greater extent, still leaders in the broader community, even beyond the Jewish community. I decided, can I tell a quick story?
Please.
Okay, so Senator Joe Lieberman, right? People know Senator Lieberman was
They know him well. Yes,
okay.
They're very familiar with him.
So Senator Lieberman was, as you may have read, I hope you've read, certainly we were all proud of the fact that he was the first Jewish candidate for vice president of the United States.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ted, but Yoav, he knows that you're Senator Lieberman's grandson. So just letting you, we shared that.
Great, okay. I feel even better about telling the story. So Senator Lieberman was on the ticket with Al Gore, then ran for president 4 years later, and he and Hadassah, his wife, loved home hospitality. My wife and I was not in politics then. My wife and I hosted an event for the senator, and then when he came back down while he was campaigning, they called and they asked if he could stay with us, which I thought was a great opportunity, and said, of course. And he had just written a book about how his Judaism informs his work in public service. And after the event that he did that night, we sat and talked for a long while about the importance of bringing Jewish values to public life. And the next morning, my kids, who were very little at the time, were all sitting at our kitchen table with their hands folded, ready for Senator Lieberman to come out of the guest room. Normally, we would rush around like most families and shove the kids out the door to go to school. We were ready for the senator, and Senator Lieberman walked out, and he was carrying a shofar. And he walked out to our kitchen table, and then again, this is SAR, and so you need to really think about how incredible this was for me, given where I grew up, to have this Jewish United States senator who was running for president of the United States stand at my kitchen table, give my kids a lesson, help them understand why, since it was Elul, he carries a shofar with him to blow the shofar every day in advance of Rosh Hashanah, and then blew the shofar at our table. So that was the moment where I really thought, I wasn't in politics yet, but the night before we talked about it, and then that just showed how it's possible to be in politics and to be in public life and to really let who you are as a Jew guide you and lead in every part of what you do. And that really was the moment that I thought maybe I could do that.
It's amazing. And it takes a certain kind of confidence, a pride that actually leads to action, where you're willing to put yourself out there and do what you do in front of whoever's going to see it. And could you tell us a little bit about, because it wasn't just Jewish values, it was actually about the Jewish people that shaped some of your work in Congress. And you were co-chair of the bipartisan task force to combat anti-Semitism. And that's exactly the way that you describe it in terms of Senator Lieberman and the shofar. I think that for us to see you and say, here's a Jewish person from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and you said, I actually want to be a co-chair. I want to establish this bipartisan task force to combat anti-Semitism is a certain kind of confidence, and I'm going to make something happen. Can you tell us whatever part of that story you want to share with us about how you thought about it and what it took to make it a reality?
Sure, thank you. At the time that we launched that task force, excuse me, there were a number of really awful, violent, deadly attacks against the Jewish community in Europe. And the conversations that were taking place were about the future of Jews in Europe and how to make sense of this horrific violence in Paris and in Toulouse and in Belgium and other places across Europe. And when we launched the task force, it was really initially to support the global Jewish community, to make sure that no one ever accepted as normal the kind of violent anti-Semitism that we saw across Europe. And we couldn't have imagined at a time when we found it so shocking that there was all of this security outside of every Jewish institution across Europe, that just a few years later, the shooting at Tree of Life and then Poway and Muncie and Jersey City and on, and now we're in this moment where we are today. But it was originally started for that reason. And then as anti-Semitism really grew here, we recruited more members of Congress from all parts of the country who understood that, as we always like to say at AJC, who understood that when there is anti-Semitism in your community, in your country, whether there's a large Jewish community or not, it suggests that there's a deeper problem that we have to deal with. And that's what the task force continues to grapple with even today.
Did you find that most of your colleagues in Congress actually just identified with that if anti-Semitism exists, that's a problem for the American way of life? Or did you have to convince people of that? Is that something intuitive? Did you find people who resisted that idea?
It's not intuitive. It's not intuitive because, in large part, because of the pernicious nature, the impact of anti-Semitism for millennia. The idea that the fundamental conspiracy theory of anti-Semitism that somehow the Jews are responsible for whatever the ill is in society, that somehow it's the Jews' fault. With that sort of hanging in the air, the need to help people understand that, in fact, it's not just the Jews who are at risk when there's anti-Semitism, but there's always this desire to, and certainly October 7th changed this for so many people, but there was always this desire to just group anti-Semitism with every other kind of prejudice that existed. And so when, for example, one of my former colleagues in the House threw out some of the oldest, worst anti-Semitic tropes, talked about Jews and money, talked about Jews controlling the banks, talked about how you couldn't really be a good American if you also supported Israel. Well, that seemed like an easy time for us to do exactly this, to say, this is anti-Semitism and we need to condemn it, period. And what happened, as you may recall, is we went from a straight condemnation of anti-Semitism to a document, a resolution that condemned every kind of ill in the world, and it lost sight of the fact that there was this real problem that affected the Jewish community, language that for so long has resulted in terrible things happening to the Jewish community. That's what we needed to focus on. It was very frustrating that we couldn't do it then. That was in 2019. After October 7th, I think for a lot of people, all of that changed.
it changed in practice. Can you say a little bit more? It changed when you say that it changed. It changed in terms of our experience or people's understandings of what needs to, the importance of focusing on anti-Semitism.
Well, when we saw on October 8th, excuse me, when we saw the protests taking place on campuses in those moments immediately after the horrific Hamas attack on Israel, those marches took place before a single IDF soldier marched into Gaza to defend Israel. When there were still terrorists on the ground in Israel, the only thing that they were marching in support of was Hamas's goal to destroy Israel and slaughter Jews. And so for a lot of people, that was clarifying. This was a moment to realize that the threat of anti-Semitism is real and needs to be confronted head on. And that's something that we've worked to do. And it's part of our history as an organization. It's almost 120 years old, but it's something that we've really worked to focus on every day since October 7th.
So the idea, when you're talking about anti-Semitism, that can generate different kinds of responses and emotions, because it's a frightening thought. When you think about our history, anti-Semitism leads to persecution. Right. Persecution is a frightening idea. We're in the United States of America. So I'm wondering when you, I can imagine a range of reactions. Let's say if you're a teenager in a school and you see all these things popping up on your feeds, you can end up being afraid to walk around as a Jew. Or you can feel like I have to fight. Like, how would you address that? And what counsel would you give to people growing up in the world there, right now?
Well, I know I saw the schedule of the day, and I know some of these topics are being dealt with directly. But I would just, as I said before, the most important thing to do is to remember, first of all, and I know this is a terrible thing to say to students, but I'm going to say it anyway. Social media overall, Twitter, X, not the real world. It's not the real world. And facts don't matter. And it's why since October 7th, so much of what we've seen on Instagram and on TikTok have been these short videos, often completely made up, often with videos and images from other times. It's important to remember that's not real. What's real is what's happening every day as we continue to grapple with the fact that 59 hostages haven't been returned. That's what's real. And what's real is the history of the modern state of Israel, which is in itself a miracle. And the knowledge, to your point, to your question, the knowledge that all of you bring to those conversations and the facts that you have at your fingertips, and add to that the way that you feel about these issues right here, that's what really matters. That's the effectiveness. That's how teenagers, that's how young people can lead right now. Your ability to move the debate, to make sure that people better understand what's happening, to understand why this is personal to you, and why, just like everyone else who has personal feelings thinks and knows that people should hear them, the same thing applies to us. And as proud Jews, you're in the best position to help others understand all of this. So that's the power that everyone in this room possesses already.
Do you have some initial thoughts about what to do? Because sometimes the question is, we'd love to do something. What actually can we do?
Sure. First of all, again, I know this is not as relevant at SAR with your classmates as it was for me at Liberty High School with all of my non-Jewish classmates. I mean, you're sitting, like the level of knowledge that all of you have is sky high, and that's amazing. So that's what you can share with others. And you can share it in lots of different ways. You can share it with people that you know outside of school. You can share it with elected officials. I mean, is this Richie's district?
Yes.
Right. So not every member of Congress.
He's graced our halls very often.
Yeah. I mean, not every member of Congress. This is the most obvious thing I ever said. Not every member of Congress is Richie Torres, though we wish that were the case. But there are local officials and Richie's office. First of all, let me back up. Richie Torres, I want to just be really clear about this. Having served as a member of Congress, it's important for you to know that there are a million issues, or to remind you, there are a million issues members of Congress have to deal with. The fact that Richie Torres is such a powerful leader, speaking up in support of Israel and the Jewish community, and willing to take on anyone who's peddling in the kinds of lies and misstatements that we see over and over, is not to be taken for granted. So let me start with, what can you do? Make sure that Richie understands that you're there with him and appreciate what he does, and offer to be his supporters in carrying out this battle. What happens in communities around the country is that they tend to think, in communities with large Jewish communities, is sometimes they take for granted that everybody feels like they're elected officials. It's not true. So what you can do on your own social media feed, what you can do with your local elected officials, what you could do by working with groups like AJC and other advocacy organizations to help make sure that everyone understands why it's so important to speak up as proud Jews in support of Israel and the global Jewish community. That's something that everyone can do right now.
I want to give an opportunity for students to ask questions too, but I just want to ask you one more thing about, it really is about your confidence in the United States of America and as a place, as a home for the Jewish people going forward. Have been any cracks in your faith in that regard? Do you feel like this is a home for us for the foreseeable future? How do you think about that?
So the answer is yes. Look, it is a home for us. My grandparents came from Lithuania and Belarus. My parents didn't go to college. My father graduated from high school and immediately enlisted in the army to go fight the Nazis in the Battle of the Bulge, and took a piece of shrapnel through his helmet that almost killed him. And as he told us all the time growing up, in America, it is important for us to remember that we are Jews and proud Americans, and that they are inextricably linked. And yes, I absolutely believe in the future of our country, but it's up to all of us. It's up to all of us to make sure that it's a future, not just where we're welcome, but where everyone appreciates that in every community in which Jews have lived, everywhere in the world, since we were placed on this earth, we have made positive contributions to those communities, strengthening the overall community as a result. That's what we continue to do in the United States. That's a message that people have to continue to hear. Last thing on this, I travel a lot in this job. We work with the Jewish community all around the world. And what I've heard from young Jews in Brazil and in Paris and in London, they ask, we see what's going on in America, and we wonder if it's okay for Jews to continue living in America. The same question that some of us might ask about some of their own countries. And the answer is, and this is what I would leave with everyone, that our global Jewish community is tiny relative to the overall population of the world. And the whole notion of calling Israel Arvim Zeh Bazeh, that's what this is about. All of us have a responsibility everywhere in the world, the Jewish community, all 15 or 16 million of us have a responsibility to make sure that every Jew everywhere in the world is proud, can be proud and strong and thrive wherever he or she lives. That's the responsibility that we have. That's what we can do, and that's what we have to do together.
Great, thank you. That's really, yes, that deserves an ovation.